Welcome to Second Sunday Forum, hosted by West Falmouth Preparative Meeting and the Peace and Social Order Committee. Today is March 12th, 2023, and we acknowledge we are in Wampanoag land. Today, our topic is Blessings of the Burden, Widening the Circle of Compassion, Helping Oneself while Helping Others. Alan Burt is a member of East Sandwich Meeting and lives in Centerville, Mass, and is a social worker, homeless advocate, and author of the book, Blessings of the Burden. He will share his excerpts from his book and an overview of his experiences working with the homeless and the mentally ill since 2002. In particular, how the process of helping the lost and the hopeless, how he was blessed by them and transformed into a better human being and child of God. Please welcome Alan Burt. Thank you.
Thank you, Erica, and everyone else involved in putting together these presentations. We need them. Welcome. It's my privilege and honor to be here today to share with you the journey that I've been on regarding my work with the homeless. It's been a spiritual journey for sure. It began when I was a child. I did write a book on it, and I guess I was asked to show the book. I don't know if that shows. The book was published in 2013. Erdman, several years later, they stopped publishing it, so it's not published now. I probably have maybe 20 copies left, for sale if people want to buy it. But it's on my bucket list to get it republished. So anyway, so my story begins. I grew up in Cape Cod, Santuit, which now is considered Cotuit. I was 7 years old. I was playing out in the front yard with my two brothers, Charlie and Tom, when suddenly we saw him, Big Tony, walking down the street nearing our house. Big Tony was a dangerous man. We heard all kinds of stories about him. Now he was an old man, ragged clothes, long beard, the town drunk, living in the woods. We were told that he probably was part of the mafia, probably had killed people, all kinds of just stories everywhere about Big Tony. Being young children, on the mind out the mouth, we started screaming and yelling as we ran to the backyard. He's going to kill us. He's going to kill us. Run, run. We ran to the backyard. We hid behind trees. We then looked to watch him walk by our house, but he didn't walk by the house at all. He walked up the front steps. He walked up to the front door of Grandma's house. He knocked on the door and Grandma opened the door and she welcomed him in. We were puzzled, so we ran to the back door and we stood outside the dining room door listening the best that we could. We really couldn't hear too much what was being said, but all of a sudden we heard Big Tony crying, "No, no, I can't take your money. I can't take your money. I can't." And my grandfather saying, "It's our money, Tony. We love you and we want to help you. Please take it." We then heard the chairs move and we were afraid that we were going to get caught listening. So we ran out the back door and began playing again and largely forgot about the whole experience. We were kids. I was 7 at the time. The seed had been planted. Clearly not anything that I was aware of, but it was planted. I think of Big Tony even today as he was one of the angels in my life. So a number of years later, I was 33 years old and I was getting my master's degree, Boston University, 1986. And I was on my way home and walking to the bus station, and there he was, a homeless man sitting on a street corner. I had rehearsed it in my mind what to do in situations like this. Don't look at him. Don't talk to him. Just keep walking. As I approached this man, who probably was about my age, early 30s, he said in a very calm voice, "Do you have any spare change?" I froze up, and the words just fell out of my mouth. "No, thank you." And I walked on. I didn't turn back. No, thank you. What kind of a response? There's all kinds of responses I could have said, but no, thank you. It didn't make sense. And it troubled me on the way home. It was difficult for me to fall asleep. And in the morning, I finally got what had happened. I think of Mother Teresa, one of the things she said, that in the face of the most decrepit, you will see the distressed disguise of God. And I realized that morning that I was being asked by someone suffering. I was being asked by Jesus. I was being asked by God, would you like to do a good deed? Would you like to help someone in need? I guess I wasn't in the mood, and I politely responded, no, thank you. And I thought to myself, I never want to say that again. Whenever I am offered the opportunity, the gift to help another human being, I don't want to say no, thank you. What kind of a response is that? I don't want to freeze up. I don't want to walk by, and I don't want to not turn back. So that really, really stuck with me. But again, like with Big Tony, is the experience just kind of passed. And I went on with my life, getting my degree and beginning my work in social work. Years later, around 2001 or so, I feel I had my first real call to help the homeless. I was driving my car down North Street Hyannis, and I was approaching the stoplights of North Street and Winter Street. And I stopped. The light was red. I'd never taken that left because to the left was the Salvation Army in the shelter, the place where those people were, the stolen shopping carts, the garbage bags full of who knows what, the dangerous people. So I'm at the stoplight, and I turned to the left just for a moment. The light is still red. And there's a homeless man, elderly, white hair, long white beard, and a baseball kind of a cap on his head. And he smiled at me, and he winked at me. I turned forward. The light now was turning green. And mysteriously, I was taking a left-hand turn down Winter Street. The next thing you know, I'm driving into the Salvation Army, not knowing what is going on. I'm just feeling supposed to be here. I walked in, I met them, I asked for who's in charge here. Didn't really know much about the Salvation Army. And the Major Higbee, who I came to love Major Higbee. I asked, what could I do to help? She said, well, you're a social worker. There's all kinds of self-care groups and whatnot you could probably do in the dining hall before or after lunch. So I began to do presentations. And what happened to me after not too many of my talks, of which, the homeless that attended it, they so quickly came to accept me and appreciate me. It just felt really, I'd never felt such a warm reception. But in my talks and in the discussions among them, with me and with each other, something extraordinary was happening. I was reminding myself to do much less talking and do much more listening, because the spirituality of these folks, the way they loved each other and took care of each other, was absolutely astounding. I mean, it was breathtaking. My thought was, these are dysfunctional people, and I'm going to teach them some social skills and self-care skills. But what I was hearing is their love for one another in their desperate situation. And as I began to check with other professionals, I began to realize that no, they're not the bums, the people that aren't trying. They're the poor, they're the disadvantaged. Mental illness, physical illness, age, abuse, all kinds of reasons that people end up on the streets, poverty in and of itself. The gentleman on the corner, Hal, was in his mid-70s. His wife had got Alzheimer's, and she ends up, disappearing into a nursing home. And Hal ends up sleeping behind dumpsters. He doesn't have enough money for rent. And Hal was one of those, there's never a complaint in Hal about anything. And he was sort of like the grandfather of the homeless, always trying to kind of cheer people up. The only problem that the shelter had with Hal is that they felt that Hal was allowing himself to be taken advantage of by the other homeless, because when Hal got his $900 a month Social Security, he was handing out $100 bills to other homeless people. And they spoke to him about that. And Hal shared with me once how he kind of snapped back saying, it's my money. I have more money than they do. And I'm going to help the best that I can. This was our Hal. And in fact, Hal was the one, after he had passed, that I was sitting at my desk, and I felt Hal within. I felt a voice, and it was Hal talking to me. And he said, Alan, write a book about us. Tell people about us. Maybe they can help. So Hal clearly was Big Tony was an angel for me. That unnamed homeless man on the street corner of Boston was an angel visit for me. And certainly Hal was that for me. And I really consider the soup kitchen people as my soup kitchen angels as well. I mean, they just began to open me up in so many ways. So very blessed, by them. So I began to feel it was my duty to begin to speak out to the town, because it seemed like, from what I was reading and hearing about from other professionals, that those working, trying to help the homeless, weren't appreciated. And, many in the community just wished that those people were not around. And if you folks weren't there trying to help them, maybe they wouldn't be here. And it really struck me as something very tragic. I didn't really know what I could do, but I did begin to go to town hall and to speak to the town councils as the community leaders that they needed to do more. I was booed by some of them. I was told that they were bums. The president of the town council at the time said, we had to take those people, this is 2001, we had to take them to the Sagamore Bridge and dump them off the bridge. Can you imagine that on public TV? That was the sentiment at the time. The Hyannis counselors and the business community, maybe a large segment, I don't want to say all of them, but there was this feeling that they were bad for business. The sight of the homeless was bad for business. I began to meet with the Assembly of Delegates, spoke with representatives, Senator O'Leary and others. Senators said that it's politics. Of course, we want to help the homeless, but if we make helping the homeless our platform, we won't get reelected. Sad but true, we won't get reelected. The thinking out there is that those people are draining our income and those people aren't deserving of the help. I wrote probably 50 articles or so. I then decided I needed to get more involved. So I began to meet with the town councilors that were having these meetings about what to do with those people. And I helped to form the Barnstable Human Needs Study Committee on what to do. Some of the people on the committee I felt were earnestly looking for ways in which we could help the homeless. Others were very questionable figures. And all of a sudden, what ended up happening is, which I considered my second call to action, the decision was made, some of the committee members, one of them being the town president councilor, had worked with the police and the Department of Public Health to go with bulldozers to bulldoze the camps, to steal the homeless, their tents and their belongings, and to put signs out there in the woods, no trespassing, and violators will be arrested and prosecuted. I was shocked, and so were some of the members on the Human Needs Study Committee. But again, it really was a war. This was a very controversial subject, this helping the homeless. The next thing I knew, total overwhelm. I mean, what am I going to do? Feeling that I'm supposed to do something. My wife and I put up some money to bring about 20 of the homeless that were displaced out to Charmy Kroll State Park, and then to Miles Standish Park. And so over the summer, each day we would have them, bus vanned into the state parks. And I mean, I'm telling you, I was just totally overwhelmed. I mean, what had I gotten myself into? I just had no idea. I was just kind of compelled to do that. But I felt so inadequate. And what happened was, the next group of angels, my woods angels, I saw just something extraordinarily happening there, out there in the woods each day, and sleeping with them. I mean, the relationship with them and within myself, it just continued to grow from that seed that had been planted way back in the age of 7, I guess. And what I saw was these men and women who before were scattered, and really afraid of each other, how they really began to connect with each other and share their love and compassion for each other. There was this one woman who was a paranoid schizophrenic. She never spoke with anyone. Suddenly she becomes the cook. And then she becomes the camp counselor. People are going to her with their problems, and she is so lovingly and articulately helping them. I saw this transformation taking, place right there in the woods, with the homeless, people. It was absolutely extraordinary. I just didn't know really what I was doing. I met Billy Bishop. Billy had been homeless for 10 years on the street. 10 years earlier, his mother and father died within a week of each other. Billy was a mess, and he was a fisherman, and he was unable to work. He began drinking heavily, and he fell to the streets. And Billy became my guide, and he just helped me to figure out what I was supposed to do. And when the summer was over, what is supposed to happen? So one of the things is I got on the phone, I'm standing out there in the woods, and I called Royden Richardson. He was one of the town councilors. And I said, I know of this house that was taken by eminent domain 20 years ago for a parking lot that was never used for a parking lot. And I said, let's use that. Let's find a way to get use of that land and that house to help the homeless. And in time, the pilot house, which was this really controversial idea of taking people in a wet shelter, they can be using, there was no barriers to getting in, and that program did happen. I helped start it, and then I turned it over. But good work, was beginning to get done there. My next call to action was the beginning of the Overnights program, which some of you are probably aware of, where for 5 years, every night of the year, I coordinated with 45 churches. And every night of the year, we brought, 6 to 10 homeless men and women to churches for a meal, an overnight, a breakfast, and a loving farewell. The program lasted for about 5 years. Then the fire marshal got involved. Some fire chief, I believe in Plymouth, raised concerns about the safety issues of homeless people being in the churches, and the fire marshal made some requirements which really pretty much dismantled the program, that all the churches, although they were already approved as safe for fire standards, now had to have everything electric wired, the sprinklers, the smoke detectors, and probably the most damaging one was the requirement that all of the volunteers needed to be awake all night. Well, the volunteers slept with the homeless. They weren't awake, and to get volunteers to even do, this duty was difficult enough, but to get people to stay awake all night, it began to fall apart. So I sat down with 4 of the homeless people, and they're really bright, incredible human beings, and came up with the idea of homeless, not hopeless. Let's find a house to rent. Let's make it affordable, no profit, just enough money to make it work so we could live in houses. So we found a house. It was a 6-bedroom house, and of course we filled it right away. And within a few weeks, we found another rental. So now we had a house for the men and the women. We then rented a second house, a third house, a fourth house. We're like now 50 beds. Had a wonderful board of directors. I was a probation officer for 20 years, and in my time during that 20 years, since 93, I was greatly involved with trying to help people on probation that had fallen to the streets. And Judge Reardon, who was a presiding judge, as soon as he resigned, he joined the board of Homeless Not Hopeless. And we had a wonderful deacon who didn't have permission by the Catholic Church to have homeless in the church because he didn't think he'd get permission, but he brought them in there anyway. And we bought a house, we bought a second house, a third house, a fourth house. This program was opened up in 2007. It's still running. We have mortgages, but we have 4 houses and 50 beds, and it's the same price, $450 a month to get in, which makes it affordable for the homeless. So sober houses used to be affordable around that price, but now sober houses are $800 to $900 a month, which if you're really, really poor and you're homeless, you can't afford to get in there. So that program, has worked really, really well. I then created a program. I started the first National Homeless Persons Memorial Day on Cape Cod back in 2002, and it involved a sleep out. And during one of the sleep outs in Falmouth at the Quaker Church, several of the congregation members joined us. And in the morning, there was discussion, what can we do in Falmouth? And the idea was, which we ended up naming BTEO, belonging to each other, just a wonderful concept. We all belong to each other. And it involved raising money between the churches in Falmouth and the general public in Falmouth to have enough money to rent 2 houses, 1 house for men, 1 house for women, specifically for people that are homeless in Falmouth. And there was no cost to the people that were in it because we wanted them to save money. We provided, I ran this program for 5 years, and then I turned it over, just as I turned Homeless Not Hopeless over. I'm involved, but I seem to create these situations that are just too overwhelming, for me. But I get good people to take over. Deacon Ralph Cox once said that he hopes that he outlives me because he would like to do the eulogy. And what he wants to say is, everybody thought, that Alan Burt did so much to help the homeless, but let's really think about that. He got us to do all the work. Anyway, so belonging to each other provides case management. And most of the people that end up being taken off the streets in Falmouth, that by the end of the winter, they've got housing certificates, they've got benefits that they didn't have before, and most of them get placed somewhere. Very few of them just ending up staying on the street. So it's been a very successful program, and I'm so grateful that I was able to turn it over and just, say good things about the program at this point. So there's just all kinds of experiences that I had, and I think the best way for me to, proceed now in this conversation is just to share some really specific stories, experiences, and these I wrote about in my book. So I talked a little bit about Billy Bishop. I may talk a little bit more about him, depending on how time comes. So Big Tom was a homeless man. I never really got to know him that well. He was probably 6'5" or 6'6", long hair. He had lost his eye. I never learned what happened with that. He had a black patch over his eye, big scruffy beard, just tall, a giant of a man, the kind of person that I think that if I was in a dark alleyway, I would probably scream and run. And he always sat in the shelter. There was this couch that kind of faced the door as people walked in. And I would go to the shelter every night during those 5 years to get people. And I'd ask the staff, who's safe to come to the churches, because I didn't want there to be problems. And there really never was a problem in those 5 years. And there were always wonderful people that were so spiritual and so safe to go. But one day he motioned me over with his large hand. And so I went over and he said, "Could you sit down?" And I had no idea what he was going to say. I'd never spoken to him. And I sat down and he looked at me. He paused and he said, "I see what you're doing. I want to thank you. You're making a difference. You're helping these people." He never came to the overnights, but he wanted to thank me. He saw what I was doing. That of God in everyone. It was like God was speaking to me. "I see you. Thank you." I then said to him, I've always kind of wondered about you, and I'm glad I'm sitting down to talk with you. And I just, you were always sitting right here on this couch. Whenever I come in, it's like you're like an icon. I can always count on seeing you here on this couch. And he said, "I sit here for a reason." I said, "What's the reason?" He said, "Well, the shelter can only take 50 people in. When the 51st person comes in, they have to say, 'Sorry, no room in the inn.' That's when I get up and I leave. I don't want to be the one that's preventing somebody from being in." Clearly another angel experience of mine. 2002, that was again the first National Homeless Person Memorial that I did, and I did it in the Village Green. And Big Tom was a protector of people, and a young couple got married. Two homeless folks got married, and he was the best man. And next year, 2003, the night of the memorial, the night before, Big Tom had left the shelter. He went to the Village Green. We were doing the memorial event, and he froze to death. Wow. I keep getting messages from him and from Hal and from Billy, and they just keep coming. Sarah was an elderly woman, very serious alcohol problems. Oftentimes she chose to sleep out in the woods as opposed to being with people. She had lost her way. I never did get her whole story. I mean, I showed up at the shelter every night those 5 years to get people out of the shelter and into cars. And every Saturday night, that was a difficult night to get churches to take care of the homeless because of church the next day. So I slept at the Salvation Army with them those 5 years, every Saturday. And on Sunday morning, on one of the mornings, I was just exhausted because usually, there would be, the men and women, they would just need to tell their story, to share their suffering. So I was exhausted. And as they were all leaving, I happened to notice Sarah walking into the parking lot of the Salvation Army. I was exhausted. And initially what I did, I guess I still sort of feel shameful. I hid behind the corner inside the building. I just didn't have the energy. I just wanted to go home. My car was out there. Everybody knew my car. There was no hiding. So again, I went out and I opened the door and said, "Good morning, Sarah. How can I help you?" I'm thinking she wants a sandwich. Maybe she wants to use the bathroom, just something. And she just didn't respond. And I asked her again, "Sarah, how can I help you?" She began to move towards me slowly. And I'm thinking in that moment, she's probably intoxicated and she's just really not that with it. But she kept coming closer. And the next thing I know, she was putting her hand up to my face. She put her hand on my face. And she said, "I'm not going to be alive much longer. I need God to know that I love him. Would you pray to God for me?" So I prayed. "Dear God, Sarah's in trouble. Faithful servant. She loves you. She loves life. She loves others, but she's lost her way. She's afraid. Help her, please. Help her." Sarah thanked me. She didn't want food. Didn't want anything. She wanted somebody to pray for her. She's now walking out the door across the parking lot. I thought to myself, just a few minutes ago, I was hiding from her. Now I've had this experience. 2 days later, I got the word that Sarah had died. She died on the sidewalk. She died near Champ's house, which was a sober house in Hyannis, where her husband was a resident. So she died. She needed to get close to her husband, and she died. That whole experience with Sarah, it just intensified. For many years, what I felt was the burden of the blessings. But with the help of these angels, it helped me to transform my whole experience. Rather than the burden of the blessings, I began to understand it was the blessings of the burden. As difficult as it was at times, helping those most troubled people suffering and dying on the streets. Every year when we do the homeless memorial, we recite the names of the people that died in homelessness. Men and women suffering and dying on our streets. So that was Sarah. Brenda was a woman, she's passed now. Paranoid schizophrenic, really never. I changed the names of all of these people. I've got to kind of remind myself at times what I'm talking about. She was paranoid schizophrenic, never really talked with anyone, and didn't use the shelter because she may have used it a few times, but I was told rarely because she was afraid of people. It was a cold January. It was a Saturday, so it was my night at the Salvation Army. And she came tapping at the door, and the door was unlocked, but she didn't know that. And I opened the door, and she just said, "Can I come in?" And she put her head down. And I said, of course you're welcome. Please come in. I set up a cot for her and blankets and pillow and all of that. And I said, please lie down. You're so welcome here. But she never lied down. She kept her winter coat on, and she sat crunched up in a chair the entire night. I kept checking on her. I kept hoping that she was going to lie down and sleep. But she never did. In the morning, after making breakfast and folks were beginning to leave, there was maybe about 14 of them that night, she came walking down the hall, and I didn't expect that she would say anything to me. But suddenly she stopped, and she looked at me, and she stared, and she said, "You saved my life." And again, it's just such a powerful, transformative experience that I can never forget. I learned later from Deacon Dick Murphy that this woman was at St. Francis Church in Hyannis every single morning. Dick said that he had spoken with her a few times, and that the depth of her faith was heartbreaking. This person was in such deep suffering, homeless, mentally ill. Dick said she had the faith so deep, unshakable. And I had that honor, that privilege of opening the door to her. I never forget that. Janice was such an interesting person. I'll never forget her. She got late onset of schizophrenia, like in the early 40s, which does happen to some people. Very successful. She was a supervisor, I believe, for the telephone company or something like that. And then, the mental illness took over and she eventually ended up on the streets. The thing about Janice was she was always so excited with whoever she was talking to. It was always, oh, it's so good to see you. Oh, what a joy, what a joy. How was your day? Every meeting with Janice was that way, with everybody. She just was so, excited. One day she got beaten up during the day, and her belongings were stolen, and she had many of them had the suitcases with the wheels for them to, pull around. And I put out an email to the churches that, she needs a suitcase and she needs some clothes. And I got a call from Andy in one of the churches, I believe in Harwich. And he said, I've got a suitcase. I've gone to the thrift store. She's been to our church. And I believe I got the right sizes, and I'll bring the suitcase and the clothes down tonight. So it was the very same day. So he pulls into the parking lot, and she's already out there with the other folks waiting for the cars to pick them up for the church. And she sees Andy. Now, she'd only been to Andy's church one time. This church did it once a month. She'd only been there one time. But again, she was so excited about everyone. Everyone just meant so much to her that she recognized him. She knew who he was. And she comes running over to the car. Andy, it's so good to see you. She had no idea that anybody was coming with a suitcase or anything. She was just excited to see Andy. Andy begins to cry. I began to cry. And yes, she got the suitcase, but Andy got so much more. And while this interaction was happening, I felt transported to another place. I felt as though I was in heaven, and that I was witnessing as people entered the kingdoms of heaven, feeling not worthy enough to be there, but glad to be there. And then looking off into the distance and seeing Jesus talking with some people, and Jesus turning and seeing them there, running over to them. So good to see you. So happy to see you. This experience gave me that sense of how loved we are. Angels, angels, angels. As I began to do my presentations to the churches about the overnights program, I would present, and usually it would take a church about a year to decide whether they wanted to become part of the overnights program. There were, discussions, liability, is this really what we should be doing? But again, I did end up gathering 45 churches, which was pretty good. When I went to East Sandwich meetings, I learned about Quakers, they're out there. And I wasn't shy at that point asking for help. So I decided to present at East Sandwich meeting. So I went there, and I realize it's like 20 of them, and I'm having churches with hundreds of congregation members taking a year to decide. I didn't think it was even possible that the Quakers were going to, get involved at all. And I finished my little spiel, and one of them raised her hand and said, "When can we start?" And that really touched me. It's just kind of like something is happening here, and I really didn't know what it was. So I talked with some of them after and developed kind of a sweet relationship with them right from the start. And one of them, Lynn Abbott, who was a member of East Sandwich Meeting, later called me to say that she had gone to the homeless memorial in the village green. And she said that some of the homeless women thought that she was homeless. And they reassured her. They said, "Look, we're going to take care of you. You have nothing to worry about. We're going to make sure you get everything that you need. We will protect you. We will be there with you." And she said she didn't have the heart to tell them that she wasn't homeless. But as she's telling me this story, and I'm talking to a Quaker. There was something about my first experience at East Sandwich with a presentation, and now I'm listening to, this Quaker. So I decided, to attend, and I asked her if I could sit next to her, and I did. I went that Sunday. I sat down, and the minister hadn't come out yet, and I said to her, "When does the minister come out?" And she said, "Now this is silent worship." And I said, "Oh, I didn't know." And I had meditated for a number of years, so I enjoyed, the silence. But the new experience for me was sitting, not meditation is a similar word, but sitting in silence with other human beings. That was new to me. I'd always meditated alone. And it was just something so intense about that experience of sitting with others that I felt moved to learn more about the Quakers, and continued to attend, and eventually became a Quaker. I was really, really moved, that part of me, the advocate part of me, to meet Louis Randa, who is a director of the Peace Abbey, and getting involved with him in some of the stone walks for victims of violence, the pandemic stone, working with Gail Melix on issues, the needs of the natives in our area, and how to help them. And I have just felt so much at home with the Quakers. And I wrote a poem that kind of describes my faith with the Quakers, and I'll just read it. "In terms of my faith, I searched long for a place to worship where I felt welcomed, loved, and inspired. In retrospect, I was looking in the wrong places. And then unexpectedly, I found it as I sat in silence with Quakers, and found a direct link to my higher power. How profound this discovery of that of God in everyone." So it's quarter of. So I'm thinking maybe now's a good time to stop for questions or comments.
Logan, do the homeless need to put up $450?
At Homeless Not Hopeless, we've got a good resource with a few organizations that help people to get in right from the start, because some people may not have the $450 immediately. We don't accept any state or federal monies. There's a lot of strings to them, so we do need people to be able to have the $450, which most of them do, because almost all of them are on a disability. And sometimes people fall behind, but we've never had to ask somebody to leave because they didn't have the money. We've had to ask people to leave over the years because of behavior, type issues of, being a threat to other people and whatnot, but never because of their income, because there's always going to be money somewhere to help them with that. Gail?
Yeah, Alan, I can't remember, but it seemed like a huge amount. How many homeless died due to homelessness in 2022?
Well, it's the way the information is gathered is changed. I mean, I ran all of this um, in 2002 up to probably 2010, and I only counted the number of people that literally died out there, outside. They now include people that have been homeless, and if they had been housed within 6 months. Because what happens is people that have been outside too long, it dramatically shortens their lifespan, and they develop very serious issues. But over the past several years, it's in the 20s. It's in the high 20s of people that had been homeless for quite some time and have died. So there's a lot of deaths out there.
Um, I don't know who PD or Paul Denoncourt is asking, is the number of homelessness on Cape Cod increasing, decreasing, or staying stable?
It's on the increase. It's the getting housing certificates over the years. It used to be to get like a Section 8 housing certificate, you could wait years to get that. Over the years, what I saw happening is people can get the certificates quicker. It still takes too long, but the number of affordable rentals has decreased. So, the numbers are increasing, and the age is increasing. We're in a real crisis for the elderly in America. I'm the chair of the Citizens Advisory Group for the Department of Mental Health on Cape Cod, and I've also been the chair of Southeast Massachusetts. And in my discussions with the National Council on Aging, because of the baby boom era, the needs of the elderly are in a critical point right now. But because of the baby boom era, we have essentially 30 million elderly citizens in America. And in the next 8 or 9 years, it's going to go from 30 to 70. So there's like huge. So we're seeing more elderly, again, they can't afford, like with Hal, if your partner dies or disappears in a nursing home, the Social Security is gone and you become homeless. It's quite a crisis.
Can you estimate the need for support in comparison to the support available from the Jordans?
Well, we need more housing for them, certainly. There's talk now of moving the shelter, and over the years, all the efforts that I've been involved with moving to the shelter is moving them away from downtown Hyannis, which would make it more difficult for the homeless to get to their medical appointments at the hospital or the Duffy. What I've been doing the last, Homeless Not Hopeless is taking care of itself, which I'm so happy for, and belonging to each other is taking care of itself. So Billy Bishop and I, we decided a couple of years ago that one way that we could help is to raise money for Stop and Shop cards, which would, people that were living in the cars, and many people are living in their cars that you don't even know about, they can use Stop and Shop for gas and also for food. And one of the members of East Sandwich Meeting is a retired executive from MasterCard, and one of his benefits as a retired executive is he can match funds up to $15,000. So we've developed a relationship with the Peace Abbey, and over the past couple of years, we've given out over $20,000 in Stop and Shop cards directly to the homeless. So that's what I'm involved with now. There's always a need for clothes and blankets. I bought some blankets the other day to the shelter. The needs are huge. I went to a woman's house. She responded to one of my newspaper articles, and she wanted me to come by and get some blankets for the homeless. And I went to her house. I'd say she was in her 90s. The house was freezing. I ended up opening the refrigerator. There was no food in the refrigerator. she was an elderly person that was suffering, and yet she's wanting to give. And the need is huge out there. It's just absolutely huge.
Are there any more questions you can ask directly?
Yeah,
This isn't a question, but it's an explanation that your message, your speech has been so moving that some of us just need time to just take it in. So
Yeah.
if there are moments of quiet, we're just worshiping. Thank you.
I agree with that. Brenda says that she's been seeing a lot of documentaries trying to address the criminalization of homelessness in America. And has this helped make the issues of homeless people face more apparent to the public?
Yeah, I mean, I was a probation officer for 20 years. And even recently I was working with someone, and I don't know why they were put on the bracelet. It was a restraining order kind of a thing. It wasn't a serious thing. And usually you just get a restraining order. But this person was homeless. And if you get put on a bracelet, you have to be living in a place that you can plug in, the gizmo that's connected to the bracelet. And so this person didn't have a home, and was, constantly, being threatened to be arrested. Now, if he had been held, many people end up getting held, especially if it becomes a superior court case. You can easily be held for over a year. Even if you end up being found not guilty, you've served a sentence. So the homeless, Judge Reardon used to refer to some of the crimes that they committed, which largely were like trespassing, breaking and entering, breaking into people's tool sheds to survive, or garages, things like that. He used to refer to them as crimes of poverty. When people get too desperate, some of your social skills, kind of go out the window because you're desperate. And it's the lack of programs for the homeless, the lack of programs for people with substance issues. I mean, it's unbelievable, the people trying to get help, and there not being resources for them. So it really is an ongoing travesty out there. Most of the counties in Massachusetts, they don't have homeless at all. They do. But if you don't look, you don't see. And if you don't look and you don't see, you don't feel a commitment to do something about it. So the Cape Cod, I've been working with Martha's Vineyard, and they developed their own overnights program and homeless not helpless program. And there's 7 acres of land that I helped because of my involvement in the Department of Mental Health, that this is Department of Mental Health owned land. And we're struggling with the town entities and Martha's Vineyard that we want to build a shelter with all of the organizations to help them to be wrapped around. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed, but right now it's a battle with the towns not wanting that kind of a thing, there. And they tried to insert, we really need this for like parking for the transit system. So it's a struggle. And I guess that's just like, I'm obviously, I guess, trying to, when I do these talks, and it's been like quite a few years since I've actually done this kind of talk, sort of publicly like this. But my feeling is, my hope is that most of us can just find some group of human beings that are suffering, whether it's domestic violence or anything. And just people think that I'm spending like most of my life helping the homeless, and it's not true at all. I've just made it important to have, a significant part of my life that I'm being bold, that I'm trying to make a difference, that I want to take my gratitude for my existence, my gratitude for the blessings that I've experienced, and to do something to help those that don't have that. And I think that's always been my encouragement. Helping the homeless isn't everyone's cup of tea, but there's just a lot of people, whether it's the natives, whether it's persons of color, the poor, the mentally ill. There's just a way that we can get more involved in some way. I'm grateful for the opportunity, and I love you guys. I love being a Quaker. I love the sitting in silence with you. I love the relationships that I've developed, with a number of you. I look forward to others, and I just love it. I feel at home, and it's just wonderful.
Thank you so much for your presentation and for your presence in the world. Alan, thank you very much.
And thank you, Erica, and others like you that are making these presentations, possible in your work, with the Native Americans and others. I mean, I always feel a little uncomfortable, you worry about ego, you talk and you do articles and things like this, how much of it is the ego, but some of us need to be the voice, the voice crying in the wilderness. And that's what I found at the town council. Nobody was just expressing the voice at all. It wasn't welcomed at first, but in time, some of the councils got on board. Some of the councils became incredible leaders in this effort. So whatever our cause is, my hope is that some of us get over the shyness, the awkwardness of getting public about there's something happening out there and we need to talk about it. And maybe we're not going to be so well received initially, but in the beginning there was the word, and the word was good, and we need to share it. So God bless all of you. Enjoy the day, my friends.
Thank you so much. Thank you. God bless.